A lot of people who are therapists in this field have never experienced working with someone who's lost somebody to a homicide.
Future Risers, how you guys doing? Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're listening to Raise Voices. We are so glad to be back in this space. Listen, today we have a solo interview. Miss Kathy is back, but she's solo today. You've seen her in a prior conversation where she had a duo with her and they were a powerful trio from Family Services. But today we wanted to enter this space and have a conversation with her about a peer group that she has and sort of why that was started, what that is about. And so she was gracious enough to allow me some time to sit with her for a little time to just bring some light to this group and what it's about, and hopefully to offer some ray of hope. And as you guys know, what we're going to do is we're going to start with a word of the day. I've really been thinking about having word of the day back, even on the solo interviews. As you guys know, previously we didn't do that, but here we are. So we're going to talk with the word of the day, and then I'm going to tell you the topic of discussion. And then, as you know, everything else unfolds organically. All right. So take the ride and come on the journey with us. All right. So Miss Kathy, it's just you and I. So when I do this word of the day, we have no help.
It's okay.
We're the team. So this one is from Theodore Roosevelt, okay? And it says, believe you can, and you're halfway there. So Miss Kathy, I'm gonna throw it to you as the guest in the solo interview to tell me what that strikes in you, and then I'll take a little stab at it, if that's okay.
Oh, well, that's great because it really reflects a lot of the work that I do. Yeah. And with clients, with people who have been through a lot in their lives. And it all starts with your mind. Yeah. And what is in your mind. And if you're believing that it's possible, like he said, you are halfway there. Yeah. And almost envisioning that it's the way you want it to be right now. Yeah. You know, and I've done that a lot, creative visualization. Mm-hmm. And I think it helps with people who have been through a lot to believe that they can get through what they're going through right at that moment, when at the moment you think you will never be the same. You probably won't be the same. Yeah. If things have happened to you that we're going to talk about, but you can get back to a place where you're healing and you're healed.
Yeah. And oftentimes I believe the connection is where we have so much mental health. That is a focus, right? Whether we're looking on mental health in terms of someone has a chemical imbalance or someone just has stress that has led to a different kind of trigger within the body, or it could have been a physical disease that started impacting the mental cognitive processing. You're so right. There is a battle in our minds, right? That's where we create, right? We create in our minds. We don't create in our hearts. So you all got to stop that. Like, we create in our minds, and then our hearts feel it and gives us the passion and the energy to go forward. Right. But the idea, the thought, the wanting, it really starts in a mental place. And you're right. If we don't protect that space, and if we don't believe that we can do great work in that space, we get stuck.
Yeah, and there's a saying that I've heard before that reminds me of this, don't believe everything you think.
Yes.
Yes.
Especially when you haven't investigated. Yeah, you haven't investigated it and then you just believe it right off. Danger.
Right.
Danger. So I also love this because what I've started to learn on this personal development journey, especially when I talk to great women that are doing great work in our communities, is that I realize that I believe, just me as Ali, believe that everyone is born with creative fibers within them, but they activate it at different points of their lives, right? And those points come through experience, education, or some type of training that they get, right? But I'm starting to believe that in society, we often talk about someone who is a logical thinker and then someone who's a creative thinker. And I believe those two are one in the same, but executed or show up differently. And I believe being a logical and systematic thinker is also a creative thinker. And so I'm trying within my own self to not always say, oh, I'm a left brain thinker or a right brain thinker, but I want to use the whole brain.
Correct.
Yeah, I just want to use all of it to make sure that I'm putting forward my best self first to me, my family, and then externally, so that I am giving out good, but that I'm feeling good to give out good. And so that, so it's authentic. So I do love this saying, believe you can, and you're halfway there. We're not saying everything can be solved, but we're saying that idea and belief starts in the mental capacity before it can go down to the heart, and then definitely before the body activates the action of it.
Right. So, and it's not always easy to do.
Right. Yes. It's intentional. Right. And right. Part of what we talk about here is, I believe, Ms. Sound believes that proactive intention and simple living is part of all personal development journey. Why do we say that? When you start complicating things in your life and then life outside you gets complicated, you feel overwhelmed.
Yes.
Something's got to get more basic. Something's got to get more basic, right? Turning off the TV at 10 o'clock every night. You just got to something's got to get more basic, coming off of social media after 2 hours, something's got to get simplified.
Back down to nature.
Yes, yes. So, hey, guys, here's what we're talking about today. All of our topics are serious, and we do bring humor because we are humorous people. Because of the things and the topics we're touching, we still have to have some sense. But this one is different. And so the focus of where we're going with the conversation is around supporting and providing some type of service to folks who have experienced loss through their loved ones being murdered. Yes, homicide. That's what we're talking about. And Miss Kathy has a group that she is very much a part of, instrumental in getting this group to foster a peer support community and support system where she works, so that they have an outlet and a place to come and not feel alienated because this tragic, horrible thing has happened and they are having an out-of-body experience, because there may not be anyone who understands. So hopefully, Ms. Kathy, I've done that justice. I'm going to have you tell us, did something happen to you for you to see there was a gap in our communities that needed a group that would allow someone who experienced something so horrific to have an outlet? So if you would walk us through a little bit of your journey there.
Sure. So back when I started working at the agency Family Services in '92, I had already experienced the murder of my sister in 1989. So I had thought it would be helpful and healing for me to help other people who have been through it, because I was at a place where I was feeling healed. Yeah. And I noticed there was a gap. There was no kind of support, as there was counseling, one-on-one counseling, but there was no support group. And I really think that with this type of crime, it's extremely important to be around other people who have experienced it, because it's really even hard for one-on-one counseling to get it. A lot of people who are therapists in this field have never experienced working with someone who's lost somebody to a homicide. Mm-hmm. It's not like a regular death. It's not like a illness, although those are very traumatizing also. Yeah. It's a violent death, and somebody took that person's life purposefully, usually, and it's not something you ever think is going to happen to you.
Right.
It's almost like you're in some kind of a strange movie when you first find out this has happened to you, and you're really not yourself for a long time.
Yes.
So that's why I started the group, and we have about 5 people right now. Mm-hmm. I'm sure there's a lot more out there. Yeah. But it's a hard thing to do, is to come to a group like this. But some of the things that we do in our group is validate what we've all been through.
Yeah.
And when people first come to the group, they're at a really difficult place usually. And it may be a few months later, but it doesn't just go away. It doesn't ever go away, really. But we try to validate what they're going through and normalize their feelings.
Yeah.
Because, you know, it's really hard to talk to other people about this.
Yeah.
Who have not experienced it. You know, people will say things like, and we talk about this in the group, oh, you know, God needed them. That's why, you know, they took them, or you need to get over it. You need to move on.
Mm.
And everyone grieves at their own pace.
Yes.
And nobody can tell you how long you grieve for.
Yes.
I'm trying to think of some other things they said, or else they want to know about the gory details.
Yeah.
You know, because people love crime shows and things like that. So they start asking really personal questions about gory details of what happened to that person.
Yeah. That's our human selves always thinking that if we know enough details, we can justify what has happened or how we deal with the aftermath.
Right. And they also will say things that kind of victim blame. Like, well, what was she doing there? Why did she go there? And I realized I used to get very angry in the beginning about that. But then I realized that people do that because if they say, you know, oh, well, they were in this place, I would never have gone to that place, so it can't happen to me.
Yeah.
You know, so it kind of it'll make them feel better that this can't happen to me because I wouldn't have gone there. I wouldn't have done this.
Yeah.
But it can happen to anybody,
Yeah.
you know, and nobody deserves that. So, you know, I've come to terms with why people say things like that.
Yeah.
And we actually made a collage in my group of all the things people have said to them.
Wow.
And I'll
Yeah.
show it to you someday. And all the things that, you know, are upsetting to people of going through this. What not to say, in other words.
Yeah. So is there, outside of your particular group, in your instance, is there a hotline that supports someone who has lost someone close to them, or is that not a thing?
Well, the Crime Victims Hotline at Family Services in the Center for Victim Safety and Support, they will deal with that type of thing. Any kind of a crime, you can call that hotline.
Okay.
And people do call it for that reason.
Yeah.
There's other services for people who've lost a loved one to violence, such as the Office of Victim Services will help pay for the funeral costs. And counseling, one-on-one counseling, there's my group.
Yeah.
So there's other services related to it. So you can call that hotline.
Yeah, but as you're saying, part of the issue that's I'll call it just a mini epidemic for this conversation is someone being able to, whether willing or not, or capable, but being able to say, I need to be in a group to manage, to deal, to talk, to get through. And so if they're not showing up, no matter the access to support or help that you have, if someone's not showing up to that to see if it is the help they need, they do suffer in silence to some level.
Yes. And, you know, some people have other ways of dealing with and coping. They have their church or family that are helpful. Although many people have come to my group have said that it pretty much ripped their family apart at times.
Yes.
You know, so sometimes they talk about that type of thing, you know, or talk about maybe substance abuse that they turned to after it happened.
So people have their ways. Have you found, I guess my thought process here was, even though everyone grieves differently, I can imagine a mother or a father's grief being just,
Compounded,
being so
devastating.
horrible versus even a sibling, even though the sibling could have been closest to the sibling that passed.
Mhm.
When I think of the levels of how close we are to the person in terms of mom births the kid, right? That's what it's
Yeah.
going to be. So her traumatic impact and internal torment versus it's a sibling that passed away or a friend. Have you ever had to sort of have a different level of communication dependent on the relationship of the person that survived in
Well, I
relation to the
think,
person that passed away?
yeah, I mean, I walk a fine line there because everyone's grief is their own. And, I don't know their relationship with the person they
Right.
lost. We have people in the group who have lost their adult children,
Yeah.
lost their spouse,
Yeah.
siblings. I do personally feel that losing a child has
Yeah.
got to be one of the most horrendous losses you can experience, no
Right.
matter how it happened.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
and even if they're adult children, doesn't matter, it's a very great loss. So it is sometimes hard because, everyone feels that theirs is just as devastating as anybody else's, which I don't disagree with,
Yeah. So
Um,
with your group, does one have to go through other channels before they're referred to your group? So for example, does that person have to go through counseling prior to being referred to your group? Do they have to sort of prove on some level that in fact they did lose someone as a result of it being a homicide? Do you have to have that verification, or is it we trust your word?
yeah, pretty
You
much I
heard
trust
about
their
us.
word.
You come
Yeah.
in. Okay.
And we get referrals from, the victim services program. We'll get people in there and, the hospitals, the district attorney's office. Sometimes somebody just calls up because they heard about it
Mhm.
somehow, the flyer is out there.
Mhm.
And I do have to have a conversation with them
Mhm.
because I want to make sure that they are not going to be re-traumatized by
Yes.
coming into that group and they're ready for it.
Yes.
So I do prefer if somebody has had one-on-one counseling first.
Yeah.
And everybody's different. I mean, some people have not, and I can tell they're going to be okay in the group by having the conversation with them.
Mhm.
And then there are other people who really are not ready for the group. And I suggest that they see somebody first a few times and then come to the group.
Yeah.
Because we have had people come to the group where they were not ready. And it has
Re-triggered. They got
re-triggered.
re-triggered. Yeah.
Yeah, because sometimes you're hearing other people's stories.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. So
Another thing in the group that I do is I tell people to try not to talk about any of the, violent details, because that can be disturbing, especially to somebody new coming into the group.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. So I know you said that part of your preference in certain cases is to say to someone, I think we could best serve you if you had some counseling prior to staying with us and then come back, right? When someone leaves, I shouldn't say leave your group, but as they're going through the conversation in the peer support group, do you have the access or ability to then say, well, Azali, as I listen to you, here's some other things other than counseling that I'd like to recommend that I believe can be a benefit to you? Or is that crossing a line that you don't do that or can't do that?
I could do that. I don't have any recollection of having to do that.
Mm.
People who come to the group they're either gonna fit into it or they're not gonna
Mm.
wanna stay. And,
Yeah.
I've had people come once and never come again,
Yeah.
or, a few of my people in my group, have been there for a while, and we kind of went on sabbatical for a little while because it was the same people who are at the healing place and they want to help somebody new.
Yeah.
So recently had somebody new call, and they're going to come just to help that person.
Yeah.
You know, so when there's somebody new in the group, the whole group will show up for that person because they know what it was like being in that place in the beginning, because you really don't know, you don't know what's going on. You're really in shock.
Yeah. Fair enough. Personal question, if you're
Mhm.
able to answer us.
Mhm.
So how do you manage hearing these stories, having had experienced your own personal, very close loss, and not be re-triggered, pulled out of your ability to help, because you can be transported back to what happened to your sister quite easily, I imagine. So how do you
Yeah,
keep that balance and stay in that professional space to finish helping, hearing
right.
the stories?
Yeah, I mean, you can't do this work unless you've done your own work.
Wow.
So I have done my own work before this
Mm.
and come to terms with, you know, how I can help. And part of my healing was working here,
Ah.
you know, so that's why I started working here. The helping other people and knowing that they can get through this somehow is part of the healing. And that's how I keep going. People always ask me that, like, how do you do this work, even with sexual assault and domestic violence? How do you keep doing this work? Because I know that there's a rainbow
Yeah.
waiting for them if
Yeah.
they keep going. And, you know, giving people hope. I mean, it's when someone is murdered in your life, the grief comes in waves.
Mm.
And I tell people all the time, well, first of all, everyone's trying to get back to that person they were before
Yeah.
this happened. And you won't get back to that person completely, but you can get close to it.
Mm.
And people always feel that they'll never be the same. And, you know, part of them isn't going to be the same.
Mhm.
Lost a big part of your life. But I tell people all the time that all the days in the beginning are going to be bad days.
Mm.
And then the bad days will get less and the good days will increase.
Wow.
And that's really what happens with all grief, I think.
Yes.
You know, the good days will get more and the bad days will get less.
Yeah.
And people in my group, you know, I've seen them. You know, we had a woman, you know, years ago, lost her child. And I mean, she couldn't even eat. She
Mm.
was, you know, not eating. And she went through therapy. She wasn't in my group at the time, but she did go to therapy and I knew her. And recently came out of the building the other day and I heard Kathy and waving to me. And it just, you know, things like
Yeah.
that, like it makes you feel so good that that person, you know, is going on with their lives. And of
Right.
course, it's not the same without the child, but they are, you know, living their life still. And
And
people think they're never going to get back to living their life.
yes, I was going to say that there are people who I call them our local Olympians, even though they've never been to the Olympics. And what
Mm,
I mean by that is when they're able to take tragedy, use it as a catalyst to define their purpose and stand in the gap for crazy and say, we're not doing crazy today, but we're all going to be okay.
yeah,
They're my Olympians for me, in
yeah,
my mind.
yeah,
Because you do see that and you'll see a person and you'll see how steady they are and how consistent. And if you get an opportunity to speak with them and they permit you to ask certain questions, you become in disbelief when they tell you what they've been through. You're like, oh no, I can't see that. I'm like, oh no, that's why I'm so steady. I
yeah,
have to be, because I can't go back to the pain. And so I've used the pain to transport me to this new place.
Right. And people are so resilient in that way,
Yes.
including
It shocks
children.
you. It
Yeah.
shocks you and humbles you. And if you allow it, it will motivate you to take a really good look at your life and say, hey, it's time for me to level up and do more.
Right.
Whether for myself to transform or for others that are around me. So I appreciate that. Now, you mentioned domestic violence. I wanted to know, in your experience, do you find there is a correlation between domestic violence and or substance abuse that ends up a part of most homicides that you have known? Because obviously people become broken by the experiences they have, and those experiences sometimes is just too much to bear. I don't know.
Right. I mean, I don't believe that substance abuse causes domestic violence, but it can compound, it can enhance all the behaviors, of course. And sometimes when people get off the substance, they can deal with their life and go to counseling and figure out, why they do certain things they do. But I don't believe that, there's a major correlation to that. No.
That's interesting, because
It's like mental health, people will say, well, they couldn't help themselves, domestic violence. But they know how to help themselves in front of the judge. And they know how to help themselves. They're standing in line at a grocery store and someone cuts ahead of them. Do they punch them in the face? No. They know how to control themselves in certain situations. So I don't want to, make any kind of excuses for that.
Yes. Yeah. So,
although substance abuse will not help any situation.
Correct. Yeah. No, I totally understand what you mean by that. So another question, just again, based on your experience and your exposure, the cases that you've been privy to see and or work on in whatever capacity, were most of the homicides related to people are in a relationship, something went awry, and this is what happened? Was it gang violence? And so that's how the homicide, like, what's been your exposure of in things that you've been privy to, this word homicide?
Yeah.
What is the core thing that happens before that word homicide has happened and being tagged? I mean, where is it coming from? Is it coming from bad relationships? Is it coming
can.
from?
I mean, it has. There have been cases that I've seen that was, domestic violence related. And, when the person tries to leave is the most dangerous time.
Yes.
And we've seen that happen in cases. I mean, Dutchess County has a really good program where when there's a domestic violence case and the law enforcement goes out on the case, immediately they put them in touch with an advocate in our program at the scene.
Oh.
So, sometimes they don't want to talk to anybody, but they're in touch with somebody and we know about it, and, we can get them safety planning and help that they need at that moment.
Okay.
So that's a good thing that we have. There's all kinds of, like in my sister's case, this person was very heavily into substances. And do I think it would have ever happened if he wasn't? She didn't know him. She did not know him. Probably not. But it did involve a lot of drugs like crack and cocaine that, he was doing at the time. So I do think certain drugs will make you violent.
Yes.
PCP and different things that you hear about that cause violence. There's been, mental health issues with people who have committed homicide. Also. But there have been domestic violence cases that we've dealt with.
So it really is spanning from many places of the human nature.
So many.
And somehow that nature that's supposed to be more communal gets interrupted and distorted. And then these are the results. And then, like you said, if you compound someone who's controlling and or substance abuse and has a medical illness on top of all of these things that's already distorted, then we have catastrophe. And unfortunately results in someone's life being taken out unnecessarily. So wow. So that's big. If you would permit this question as well, do you ever have to speak to a young person that has experienced the loss of someone because they were murdered? Have you had to deal with that? And if it is yes, or if you work with other people in family services that have to deal with that, is the approach different than that of an adult? Just wondering.
Yeah, I mean, I have had to, when I used to be on the hotline, talk to younger people. When it's somebody very young, like a child, they would have therapy for them, play therapy with that child. And we have had children in our program that have dealt with, homicide in their life. And they have a totally different approach than I would talking to an adult, obviously. And, trained therapists, the children's home, have great people there that have worked with people who have children who have lost family members or parents.
Yeah. So a different sensitivity is applied to those cases.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm not trained to work with a young child in that situation.
Right.
My group is more of a peer support group.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. Well, risers, listen, the reason why I wanted to bring this conversation is that I wanted you to know that there are some resources out there. But I also wanted to draw attention to this point. Our communities can have resources, and if we don't use them when we know about them, I'm not talking about when we don't know, but if we don't use them, try them out, check them out, investigate them when we know they're out there, then we cannot continue to raise our voices to say, I ain't got no help. This is part of the mission that I have, is to make sure that as we raise our voices, it's not always to be yelling and screaming about lack of or gap of, but it's also to scream and yell to say, hey, but there's help over there. Go down the block, hang a left, right? And there's help there. So I really wanted to bring this conversation to shed light on that. I want to apologize to those and send my condolences out to those who've lost someone due to murder. I am so sorry for your loss. I am so sorry for your loss. I am so sorry for your loss. And whichever way you decide to find hope again, I'm asking you to try. As painful, as slow as it may be, I'm asking you to try, because we need you. And I keep saying that on this podcast. We need you. Each human is created so beautifully different. We need all of those skills and all of those differences to make sure that our communities stand strong. And so I did want to bring this conversation just to say that those of us in our communities, wherever you are, whatever state you're in, and if you're in a different country, if you know about the resources around you, whether you think someone needs them or not, just tell them. I mean, what's the harm? Just tell them. We have to stop being so closed off where we hold all of the good information to ourselves, and then we're waiting for when we can use it, but maybe somebody else can use it sooner. We shouldn't have to always wait for an opportunity to use a resource. Just give the information out. It's not going to do any harm. And maybe somebody can use it quicker than you. So that's part of what I wanted us to talk about. Two final things, Ms. Kathy. So what would you want anyone listening to this podcast to know, or to keep in mind, I should say, about a group such as yours, or something that, maybe sexual assault, domestic violence, but peer groups and support? What would you want them to just remember from our conversation today?
Well, mostly that there's hope out there, and there are other people out there who are experiencing what you're experiencing. So you're not alone, and to connect with those people, because that is so helpful in your healing process, and that there's always hope in whatever situation you're in, to call somebody, connect with somebody else who has been through it. There's so much out there to help you. I do want to mention that this coming up Wednesday is National Day of Remembrance for Murder Victims.
Oh.
And it's the 25th of September every year. And this year we are having our Remembrance Day ceremony at Family Services at 3 p.m. in the Mike Duffy room. And we read the names of people who have lost their lives to homicide. And it's a very, it's really meant for the family. And it's a very touching event where, the families can connect with each other. And we want people, one of the things is that we think people are going to forget our loved one. And we want people to remember them.
Yeah. I agree with that. Thank you for sharing that, because what it jolted to my mind was, we don't want to be invisible. Individuals, I mean, right?
Yeah.
We don't want to be invisible to the point of being counted out as being relevant. So imagine someone who has to walk through that.
Yeah, and nobody wants to say their name.
Right.
They're afraid to. And I understand that, but we want to hear their names too.
Yes, because it keeps them relevant, and it keeps their lives counting.
Right.
I agree. So I think that's powerful. I thank you guys for doing that, because I can see the power in that, where if I was in that situation, and I have had 2 brothers murdered, so I've been in that situation.
Sorry.
Yeah, I've had 2 brothers murdered, and so theirs was bad relationships went awry, and as a result, they lost their lives. So I have been there, and I didn't even think to go to a support group, to be honest, right? So I dealt with mine really through the belief in my church and what I was being taught there, dancing, because I teach dance. So I did a lot of that.
Whatever works.
To escape, I did a lot of that. And still, some days are harder than others. This week marks, I think, 5 years that my oldest brother, that looks a lot like me, so when I look in the mirror, I see him, was tragically killed. So some days and some weeks and sometimes are difficult. I've gone to the place now I can see his picture without breaking down. So I feel that's some progression that has happened, because for a couple of years I just couldn't. And so I agree with you that when I hear someone say his name, it reminds me of the relevancy of his life. So my other brother, that one's still difficult, even though he passed before. That's just difficult, that one. So still processing that one even years later.
Yeah.
Because he and I were even closer, super duper. So that one's a little tougher.
Yeah.
Again, I've gotten to the point where I can see his picture, not as long, and I can have a maybe 5 minutes, and then I just can't do it. So I say that to say that I really am careful and intentional not to bring conversations that are so far from me that I can't put myself in the shoe of my guests or the audience that will listen. I just felt it was important to bring this focus of conversation about using the resources as we find them. Just check them out. You don't know what they may hold for you, but if you give it a good try, there could be something there that helps you with the pain that you're experiencing, and that also allows you to understand you are yet relevant while you're grieving. We want you to also feel relevant as you would have wanted the loved one that was killed to have their relevancy. So I just thought a sit down with Miss Kathy was something that we needed to do to bring light to that, to bring encouragement to that, and a simple request. We have experienced it. And so we're not coming here a blank slate, having no experience, to ask you guys that as you listen, we beseech you to, if you know of the resources, just try a little. And we are hoping that it will help with your journeys, your healing, but also remind you that you're valuable. So that's where we end today. We hope it's been inspiring, encouraging. We're going to end with our rise and fall. So this will be a bit new for Miss Kathy, but with the rise and fall, Miss Kathy, we ask you to tell us from our conversation, you and I today, what is one thing that you will commit yourself to start doing, one positive thing through our interaction, and one negative thing that you're going to lay down and say, hey, I think I'm going to get rid of that negative thing, and I'll do the same before we close out the broadcast.
Okay. Well, one of the positive things I'd like to continue and start again is painting, do my artwork, because that helps my mind.
Yes.
And to drop the scanning of social media
Yes.
or watching the news.
Yes, absolutely. So my positive thing is to make sure that I go back and tag relevancy to even things that look like negative experience and reinvestigate them to see maybe if I missed something.
That's great.
I want to go back and reevaluate and reclassify and dig. And then also the thing that I would like to drop is my belief that most homicides are a result of substance abuse being a part of it, because you're right, that compounds it, but it's not always what fueled it. The things can fuel that. So I do want to bury that one in the ground and have my mind more open to the fact that it's not a 95% one way. Don't make that assumption, because I think that was a great reminder for me. So I'm going to bury that one, and I'm going to go back to things that I've once labeled negative and look again to see if I missed a positive that's in there. So that will be my rise. Miss Kathy, I've enjoyed our time. It's been intimate and calm, as I felt that this topic needed to be treated that way. I thank you for making the time and talking with me, sharing some personal things, sharing professional things, but just talking to us from your experience and your exposure. And we thank you for doing that work. I know it's not easy, because it's helping people to mend some broken areas in the way that they would allow you. So Raised Voices wanted to say thank you for the conversation. Thank you for the work. And let us know how we can support you and continue to do what you do, because obviously you're empowered to do that. So
thank you so much for having me.
Always listen.
I loved it.
Risers, do your work. I promise you, we are all here doing our work. You have to do what is necessary for you to remain relevant, and then for you to be able to pass on relevancy to those who will meet you. Whether they meet you for 1 day, 3 months, 1 year, or 20 years, if you don't work on your relevancy and it being authentic, you can't give that out. Or you empty yourself out and then we become more broken. So I want you guys to fill yourself with inspiration, motivation, empower yourself until someone can come and partner with you. I need you to find places of positive empowerment so that you can rise and fall less. I didn't say you're not going to fall. I can't promise you all that. I fall, but I want you all to rise more in every opportunity that you have and fall less, because you are great. I'll believe it till you believe it. I know I hear you guys in the back row. I keep picking on the back row people who want to walk out, I'm just going to believe it until you believe it long enough. Here at Raise Voices, we appreciate you guys. We love you guys. We're hoping that you will engage more with us. We're doing a lot to just make sure that the content comes across more clearer, visually, presented well, and ask the questions that we feel that we should be asking. And all we can ask you to do is to stay engaged with us, subscribe, share, comment, do all the good things. Be respectful, because I still have my house rules, and I'm never backing down from those. I want people to see that we are not only eloquent and educated, but we know how to behave well. So we pray that you guys have a great day. Thank you for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye, guys.
Thank you.